Where'd you grow up?
I've always lived in Hildebrand. I was born in the middle of Hildebrand, and I'm still here.
What all has changed?
Oh, take all day to tell you that.
Go for it.
Because when I was young, we didn't have telephone, we didn't have television. We had funny-looking cars, according to the way they look now. Just so much has changed, so you wouldn't believe it was the same place. A lot of the houses are gone around that I remember, and most of the people that lived around us are dead and gone, and everything's changed.
What things did you do, like, just for fun? What did you and your girlfriends go out and do?
Oh, we just walked around and acted crazy, and we used to jump on this plank that was laid over something round. It's like a seesaw, except we jumped on it. We called it jumping the plank. And we played softball in the yard and in the field across from the house, and we just didn't have a lot to do like you do these days. I remember when I was very young, I used to catch we called it the 10-cent bus that come by the road and go all the way to Hickory. And sometimes we'd go to a movie. Sometimes the mother'd send me to get something. And cost 10 cents down there and 10 cents back, would you believe?
What are some of your favorite memories?
I guess mostly going to church, because that's mostly what we done. There was a whole bunch of us girls that would get together in the neighborhood. Some of them lived there, and I remember this one family that used to come over to their grandmother's every Sunday morning, and so there'd be about 5 or 6 of us walking to church, and we was all in the same Sunday school class. And then after lunch, I'd go over and to this one friend's house and just hang around with her, and she played the piano, and we'd sing. And mostly when I was at home, I worked. My mama believed in working. I had a lot of jobs. It's my job to do. I mowed a lot of grass, helped to wash the clothes, and then I used to, in the fall, when we first come home from school, I'd hurry up and change my clothes and run all the way to Grandpa's, and we'd pick cotton till dark. Because he paid us a penny a pound to pick cotton. And that wasn't a lot of fun, but it was too, because there'd be others there my age, and we would talk, and laugh and carry on while we was picking cotton. Things just was so different then. I said we didn't have a TV, but we did have a little radio, and I remember listening to, we didn't call them soap operas back then, we called them the stories. And I remember one that was named Ma Perkins. Is about her family. In fact, I think one of the soap operas that was on till just a while back was still off of that same story. Some of the same generation of people on down was still on, well, of course it was in the story, but it was still kind of the same story. But I listened to that, and at night I'd listen to this program called Enter Sanctum. It always started off, you hear this door squeaking real loud. It was a kind of a scary story. And Mother and Daddy'd be in bed, and I'd slip up, put my ear up against the radio and listen to that. They didn't know I was listening.
No. Now, who had the first TV in Hildebrand?
I don't remember who had the first one in Hildebrand, but Mother and Daddy had the first one I ever watched to amount to anything. And we'd go up there, and I'd get so interested in looking at it, they'd be talking to me, and I didn't even know anybody was talking, and they'd all be laughing, and I'd realize they was laughing at me because I didn't hear what they was saying. But then the family that lived next to us, before we got one, the girl run over to get me one Saturday evening. She said, come over here quick, you got to see what's on TV. It was Elvis Presley. He was on the Ed Sullivan show, and he was dancing and swinging around, and I couldn't believe they put that on TV. Oh, well, then one night Merle come home with one. He'd bought one from some man, but that was mistake, because in a few days later somebody knocked on the door and it was a policeman. He come after that TV. The man that had sold it to him hadn't paid for it, and the man told him where it was. But we paid for it again. We paid for it 2 times and we kept it. And you didn't have cable or direct TV or remote or nothing like motored antenna or nothing like that. We just had a straight antenna on the house. So one night I had this girl spending the night with me, and we wanted to turn another channel, and we crawled up on top of the house and turned the antenna ourselves. Now I was still a teenager then, but we had fun that night. Yeah, things has changed so much that you wouldn't recognize it as the same place if you could go back and see what it looked like then. Because back and forth, where I walked back and forth to school, there was this big old-timey house. It was real old, and there never was lights much on there, but I knew a woman lived there, and we was afraid of her. We thought the house was haunted and she was a witch. We used to run by that house. That house is gone now. I'll probably think of more to tell you after you're gone, but it's just so different. We didn't have things to do like kids do today. Mother and Daddy didn't let us play cards. They thought that was a sin. They didn't want me to go skating, but I slipped and went anyway. They thought it was too much like dancing. I did get to go to a few movies, but that's about it. I remember one time when this girl that lived close to me and her caught the bus and went to see the movie Leave Her to Heaven. You ever seen that movie? Mm-hmm. I seen it on TV not long ago, but it was a tearjerker. We sat through it twice. That's the one that I remember the best that we went to see. I took Frances with me, my sister, a couple of times when she was pretty little, and we caught the bus and went to the movies. She thought that was something because she was just little.
Okay, you mentioned school earlier. How was school?
Up until the 8th or 9th grade, we stayed in one class. And it was a big class then. We had like 20-some kids in there. I understand now they don't have but about a dozen or maybe 14. Is that right? I always liked school and done real good in school. I just should have stayed there. But then after I got in about the 8th grade, we mostly had teachers that changed. We had a different teacher that would come in for a different subject rather than us changing classes. Until I got in high school. It was pretty much, I guess, like it is now when I got in high school, because you had to change classes for your different subjects, and pretty much like when you go into 9th grade now, it's kind of like certain subjects you have to take. It's required, so it was that way back then. Like I said, I like school. I liked 1 month finishing the 10th grade, and I always made good grades. I remember when I was in I believe it's the 8th grade, I made a C, and I was so mad because I never made nothing but A's and B's. And I still think that teacher had me confused with another girl. I really did. But then after I got me a boyfriend, I thought I was through with school. It didn't take me long to wish I was back. And I still go socialize with my class that did graduate. And there's others like me that goes too that didn't graduate with them. But, my husband didn't think he needed an education. He thought he was smart and we didn't need no education. So I always wanted to go back to school. So 1 month after he died, I went back and got my GED.
Who was your first boyfriend?
Well, I never really had a boyfriend that I dated until I started going with my husband, and then I kind of liked somebody about every year. I had a different one. I remember in the 1st grade, this little boy, Tommy Elmore, he gave me these pencils with a big old eraser on top.
Yeah.
Well, that was something back then, and he come back to my desk and give me one. So I thought that was really something.
How did you meet Papa?
Well, I was at home by myself one Sunday evening. Mother and Daddy went somewhere. My cousin Phyllis and a friend, Marilyn Vaughn, they walked up by my house and they stopped and talked a while. And they said, "Why don't you go with us? We're going down here to this church to a revival." And I said, "I better not go off with Mother and Daddy not there, you know." Let's see, how old was I then? 14, I guess. Anyway, they convinced me to go. And I wrote a note and left Mother and Daddy a note and told them where I was and when I'd be back. And I walked down there with them, and it's just a little church. And we went in, and the windows, of course, was wide open because they didn't have air conditioning or anything. And all these boys was running around outside. I could hear them laughing and carrying on out there. And if I'd have been their mom and daddy, I'd have went out there and got them. Anyway, it turned out to be the boys that we got with later. But anyhow, after the service was over, we went outside, and my cousin went with my husband's nephew, Johnny Smart, and Phyllis was going with Johnny, and Marilyn was going with Phyllis's brother Clayton, my cousin. We stand around out there, and Clayton says, "Let's go ride around. I'll go up here and get my daddy's car." So he took off after his daddy's car, and Johnny said, "Well, everybody's got a boyfriend but you." Said, "My uncle's down here." Said, "I'll go get him." And I thought, "Your uncle?" Because he was older than I was. But he come back with Merlin. That's the first time I didn't really see him that night because I didn't look at him. I didn't know what he looked like. But we rode around, and they finally took me home, and he asked me for a date, and I said, "Well, I don't date. My mom and daddy never has let me date." And he laughed. He thought that was so funny. I didn't realize then that he was 6 or 7 years older than I was. He was 6.5 years older than me. I didn't ask him if I could go with him, but Phyllis said, "If you want to see her, I'll bring her over to my house. You come over there and see her." Well, Phyllis was going off to school that fall, and it was already August, so I didn't go over there but a couple of times. And she left, and then Marilyn said, "Well, you come up to my house and see her." I think I went up there once or twice. Anyway, my cousins got to talking to my mom and daddy about it and telling them they needed to let me see this boy. He's wanting to see me, and I was old enough to date and all this stuff, you know. So they finally did. But it's still at Christmas, I still hadn't dated him, but he brought me a Christmas present. And they oohed and awed, you know, because I had a boyfriend. Embarrassed me. But they finally let him start coming to the house to see me, so that's how I got with him. Yeah, right after Christmas I did turn 15, so.
Okay, well, a little off topic. What traditions do we have, I should say?
Traditions, you mean in the family? Well, our big thing is Christmas Eve, as you know.
Yeah. Coming over here at dark 30?
Yeah, when everybody gets here and carries on and talks and I hope has a good time. That's about the biggest thing we have going. No other than that, just anytime we can get together.
Mm-hmm. Any other ones you can think of?
Another thing, I went to the beach with about every year for a long, long time. How old was you when we went the first time? I don't even remember.
I don't know. How old did you say I was?
Was a baby? Probably. Because I remember David and Dylan was pretty little. But I remember when we was in that trailer that time. I never will. I always remember David eating all that salsa. You remember that big jug of salsa you had? Every time I looked up, David had a plate of salsa. He must eat a gallon of it. We've seen all the lighthouses in North Carolina, and the Outer Banks trip, I think, was the best beach trip I ever took. I liked that one. Especially going across the big bridge where Hannah couldn't hold her breath all the way.
I tried. Now, World War II, how do you think it changed you? How do you think
It changed
affected
my
your life?
mind about. I was about 10, 11 years old, and I had uncles and cousins and all in that war, and I heard so much bad stuff about it till I never did want one of my children ever to have to go fight in the war. I guess that I would just have died if they had to. I had one uncle that was in the Pacific, and he had some kind of fever that about killed him while he was over there. And then I had a cousin that landed on the beach at Normandy and was shot in the shoulder. And I remember going to see him in the VA hospital. And I don't know, it just at that age it really had a bearing on my mind, because I seen my grandpa and grandma sit with their ear glued to the radio to hear the news about the war every day, and grandma would cry, and she says, "Them old japes is gonna kill them all." I felt so sorry for her. And we had so many in our community that this one family had 2 sons to get killed, and one was a prisoner, and he did get back, and he used to speak in our church and tell all about it. He was shot down over the English Channel and took prisoner with Germans, and he lived a horrible, worse than death in that prison camp. And his brother was in another prison camp, and when the war ended and they freed the prisoners some way or other, he asked them if he could go and to the prison where his brother was when they freed him, and so he went with them when they freed prisoners out of that other camp, and his brother was there. I thought that was a tearjerker for me. That there was just so much bad stuff about it. Yeah, I had one uncle that fought right there in the vicinity of Hitler's hideout in the Battle of the Bulge, and we was sure he wasn't going to come back, but he did. And then, well, it wasn't the Second World War, but then my brother went to Vietnam, and it just really tore me up when he went, because of all my memories of the Second World War. And we took him to put him on the plane to go over there, and I thought when he left, I thought we'll never see him again. But he got back. He made it back. But every time an airplane, he was in the Air Force, and every time a plane flew over, I cried.
Now, what war was Pawpaw in?
He was in the Second World War.
Okay, I thought so.
But he was young, and he told him he was older than what he was to get in. I don't know how he managed that, but he went in a year before he was old enough to go. And he didn't really get over there in Germany until most of the war was over. He was kind of in the cleanup crew, you might say.
So he wasn't in any sort of active
No,
duty?
he
Okay.
wasn't in any action, but he was on a ship headed for the war in the Pacific when it ended.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he never was so glad they got to come to the United States instead of going to over there toward Japan. But he said he'd never go again. They'd take him a crying if he ever had to go again. He didn't like it a bit. It was a bad time back then. I don't think we'll ever have another war like that.
I hope not.
It'll be more dropping bombs that just takes everybody on out. But
How long was Pawpaw gone?
he was gone about 2 years, I think. But he had been back. Now, he had already served his time and been back a year when I met him. Or almost a year.
So you didn't really have to deal with him not being away from home much?
No, I didn't meet him till he was already back from the war.
So what was your first job?
Oh, I've always been in the hosiery mill. After we got married, I knew somebody had to work, you know. Mm-hmm. So my uncle had a hosiery mill, and I went and asked him if he would let me learn to, we call it looping. It's sewing the toes of the socks shut, you know. Mm-hmm. And so he let me learn, and that's where I stayed Well, I didn't stay there but about 2 years, but I've been in the hosier mill. I was in the hosier mill for 50 years. That's kind of a low-paying job with no retirement, no nothing attached to it.
Did it teach you any sort of like lifelong skills?
No, I always liked to sew, and it was sort of sewing. No, there was nothing there except it was just a reputation job, just the same thing over and over and over and over and over. It teaches you to sit still and pay attention to what you're doing.
I bet so.
That's about it. But it's sometimes working in a hosier mill is about like a soap opera. There was always something going on,
You like your soap operas.
It was exciting sometimes to be there, but it was always hard for me to get up and get there on time. You had to be there sitting in your chair at 7 o'clock, and when you had 3 kids at home to get ready to go to school and all that stuff, that was hard to do.
After you married Papa and you started having kids, what all changed? Like, anything in your relationship change at all?
No, everything was always about the same between us. He just done what he wanted to and and told me what to do mostly.
How exactly did Papa die? Like, no one ever really told me.
He would never go to the doctor for anything, and he had never been in the hospital or had anything really bad wrong with him. He started having a headache in the fall before we really found out what was wrong with him. And he thought he had sinus trouble, and he would send me to the drugstore to see if the druggist had anything stronger he could take for sinus trouble. All such as that. But finally, is after Christmas, it started snowing about every other day, and he was working outside most of the time. He's outside in the weather, and the kids would go to school, and it'd start snowing, and they'd send them home. And somebody'd call me, or I'd find it out at work that the schools was closing, and I'd have to get off and go get the kids. And Mother had been keeping them for me when I'd bring them home, but this particular time she had the flu, and she said she couldn't keep them. So I went by where he worked, and I said, "Are you going to work today, or are they going to get off because of the weather?" He said, "Well, I'll be home in a few minutes. Just take them home and leave them." But when I come home that night, I knew he was sick, but he still wouldn't give up to do nothing about it. And so a couple more days he went to work, and he'd come home and he'd just about fall into bed. But this one night he come home and he wouldn't even look at you. He went straight through the house and fell on the bed. And he said, "I'm going to have to go to the doctor. I think I got pneumonia." He was hurting in his chest. So the next morning I said, "Well, do you want me to take you to the doctor, or are you going to go on by yourself?" He said, "No, you go on to work. I'll go." He said, "I can go to the doctor." So he went out to Hildebrand to the doctor, and in a little while they were still out of school that day, and Nancy called me and she said, "Mama, come home." And I said, "Nancy, I can't come home. Somebody's got to work." She said, "Mama, I said come home. Something's wrong with Daddy, and you got to come home." Well, I did. And when I got here, he was laying in the bed crying. And he said that the doctor wanted him to go for an x-ray. There's something in his chest. And he told me later, he said, "I knew then that I had cancer." About everybody in his family had cancer, or a whole lot of them had. But anyway, I took him to have an x-ray at Hickory, and it was sleeting, and I was scared to death. I had to drive. So as soon as we got the x-ray, the doctor told him, said, "I want results. You tell them down there, I want results immediately. I want to know what the x-ray says." So he called us about 2 o'clock, and he said, "There's a mass in there in his chest," and he said, "I want him in the hospital right now." And Merle said, you tell him I can't go to the hospital down there. I'll have to go to the VA. I can't afford to go to the hospital down there. So Dr. Coleman told me, he said, you call the VA administration office and ask them how to go about this. So I did. And they said, you have your doctor to call the VA hospital, tell them what's wrong, and tell them to ask for the admitting physician. And so Dr. Coleman done that for me, and he called back and he said, this was Tuesday, and he said, you be there Thursday morning at 8 o'clock. Well, it was snowing like crazy, and I didn't know how we was going to get to Asheville. But Ray had a four-wheel drive vehicle, and so I called him, and he said he'd go. So Ray and myself and Merle went to Asheville that morning. We had him there, and he was so sick when they looked at him. They didn't ask no questions. Most of the time when you go up there, you have to sit and wait and wait and wait. But they took him straight back, and they didn't have him back there long till they told us he has to stay. I didn't know what we was going to do, but he had a sister that lived up there. Beatty lived up there. And I called her and told her what was going on, and she come straight over there to the hospital, and she told me and Ray, she said, you just come on and go home with me and spend the night, and we'll come back in the morning and see what's going on. Well, I asked them to let me stay with Merle, but they wouldn't. The next morning when we come back, they was wishing they'd let me stay, because he had just went wild with whatever they give him, just set him off, and he tore the IVs out of him and everything else. So they had him in a ward where there was other men, and they had to take him out of there and put him in a semi-private room. And then they still, I couldn't stay with him, but we decided, me and Ray was coming on back, and that was on a Friday. We was coming on back, and we all went back up there. I don't know if it's on Saturday or Sunday, we all went back. But somewhere in the going back and forth, Beatty told us that anytime we wanted to come at her house and stay, we could. But they got him calmed down and decided they was going to, they used what they call cobalt on him. They put cobalt on his neck where the reason that he was having these headaches, his main tumor was in his chest, but it was spreading up his neck to his brain, and it had these big old knots on his neck. And he had showed me one of them when he was still at home, and I told him, I said, you need to do something about that. That's not right. And he said, I said, it's just a kernel. I've had kernels all my life when I was a kid. I had kernels, it'll go away. But that wasn't what it was. But they put that cobalt on those places, and they went away. But they told me they couldn't put the cobalt on that one in his chest because it was in line with his heart. Mm-hmm. And it would have hit it. So they started him on the chemotherapy, which was not nearly as advanced as it is now. It was more experimental. And they told us, they said, we don't have, anyway, the cancer that he had and where it was in the lining of his lungs. And of course it was a tumor, but it had got all in the lining of his lungs. And they said, at this point, we don't know anything to do for it. He said, we'll give him this chemotherapy if he agrees to it. Said it might help with the pain. It might prolong his death, but they just as well told us he would die. There wasn't no way to save him. So he stayed up there. I think he stayed a couple of weeks that time, and they let him come home and brought his medicine with him. And he took this big old capsule one time, and then the next time it would be intravenous. And I think they give it to him, I believe, every 3 weeks, best I remember. But anyway, he was so sick while he was at home that one night he throwed up all night long. And he he lost, I forget how many pounds it was he lost overnight. The fluid, I guess, that was coming out of it. But he was so sick, it was awful. So finally then we took him back. They kept him. He didn't come back anymore. That was first time we took him was the middle of January. And he'd get to come home a few days and go back till the middle of April. We took him back. He never come back anymore. And that's when I started staying up there. I just quit work and stayed up there at Beatty's, and mostly I stayed at the hospital. I'd go over there and take a bath and take a nap, and she'd stay with him while I was gone. And between April and the time he died, in the 7th of July, I come home one time. I had a dentist appointment. I went to the dentist, and I come back by the house, and the telephone rung, and it was Beatty. She said, "Hurry up and get back up here. He's a-hollering for you." So when I went back up there that time, I never did come back. Now, I didn't know what I was going to do with the kids. Well, Mother kept Troy. He was always her buddy and mowed her grass and stuff, so he stayed with her. And Mildred Buck took Max. And Nancy come as soon as school was out. Nancy come up there and stayed with me. She stayed over at Beatty's most of the time, but she had stayed with Johnny and Nancy Smart during school there for a while before she come up there to stay with me. But it was a rough time, let me tell you. And the way we lived was through the good graces of our friends and family. Because people come to me, give me $100 bill, $50, $100 bill. I carried about $2,000 on me all the time. And that's the way I paid the light bill and the stuff at home. And it was rough. And when he died and we come back home, I had no idea what was going to happen. Because I knew that the kids we didn't have any savings. We owned this little house and that was it. I knew there was Social Security, but I didn't know if they'd get $50 or $500. I didn't know nothing about it. But when we finally, we had put in for disability for Merle and never got it till after he died. But thank goodness they paid us back time till when we first asked for it. So that really helped. And then the kids got, I can't remember what it started off with, but the 3 kids got the maximum amount that they pay Social Security. And then when Nancy went off, I went on with them, and we still got the maximum amount until Troy graduated school. And then it was just me and Max. But we got along all right, I guess. We made it.
Now, what did Ray and Nancy and Dad and all of them, what did they do? How were they? How did it affect them?
Well, it really had, I think it had more worse effect really on Max, on Troy than any of them, because Troy was hyper, When he was little, when we lived here, he couldn't be still. He always had to be doing something. And Merle come in the evening, and he wanted everything to be quiet so he could just sit and watch TV. Troy wouldn't do that. So Merle would get mad at him, and he'd sit and make him go to bed. Troy would get so mad that he called me in there one night. He was beating on the wall, and he said, "Why don't he just die and leave me alone?" Well, as when Merle died, he couldn't get over that. I don't guess he's ever got over it. When we was up there at the hospital and he was dying, I took him into the chaplain to talk to him about it. And he tried to explain to him that he didn't have any power to, anything to do with him dying, that was God's work. He couldn't control whether somebody died or not. But he just had it in his head it's his fault. And then Max, he's always been really bitter because he didn't have a daddy, because he was only 7 years old when he died. I think he still resents that he didn't have a daddy. He asked me not long ago why I didn't get married again, and I said, well, because I don't know, I just was afraid his stepdaddy might not treat my kids the way I wanted them to.
So you
And I didn't consider getting married again.
So you didn't date anyone after that?
No, never have. Didn't have any desire to. Well, things wasn't all that great with us because Merle drank and he was bossy and he treated me like I was one of the kids. I didn't want to be done that way again.
That's understandable.
No, I said I wouldn't put up with that anymore. I think Nancy and Linda both kind of had a grudge against Merle because he never wanted them to get out and do anything like other kids did. And well, if any of them said, "Daddy, can I do something?" And the first thing he said was no. When Linda got married and left, she told me one time, she said, "Oh, I'll come back to see you, but I won't come back to see him." She was really mad at him. Ray hung around with him a lot and went to the races with him some, worked in the junkyard with him, and he was probably closer to him than any of them was. In fact, when Merle looked so bad up there in the hospital before he died. I mean, it was bad. And Ray come up there one day and he said, "Mama, I know people's going to talk about me, say things, but he said, if you don't care, I'm not going to come back." He said when he dies, he knew I had a lot of stuff up there at Beatty's and all. He said, when he dies, you call me and I'll come get you and bring you and your things home. But said, I'm not coming back. Said, I can't take it. Because he did look really bad.
On to a different topic, I guess.
Are you recording all that?
Yes. It's okay.
Well, we've been through some bad times, but you know, there's one thing I've always said, that I look back on times and I can see where God had took care of us. And if there's one thing that I believe is that God is a faithful God. He's been faithful to me even when I wasn't faithful to him, because there's been plenty of times when I wasn't. And I think my favorite hymn is "Great is Thy Faithfulness," because I think about things every time that I hear that, about how the things that we've been through, and seems like God's always took care of us. We've never went hungry or cold or really wanted for anything that was important. And my only regrets is when I look back on raising the kids, that I didn't keep them closer in church and teach them more at home, things about God and the Bible and all. And you know, I think Troy had a lot of influence on me, because he always wanted to be in everything at church. When he left home, then I tried to take his place. I thought I had to be in everything, because I don't know, it just seemed like I needed to be there, because he had always been there. Everything that went on there, he had to be in it. I remember one time when he was first learning sign language, and the girls went to visit the deaf school, the GA girls, and he was going to go with them. And I said, "No, you're not." I didn't know that he wanted to go help them, you know, help them communicate.
You just thought he was there for the girls.
Yeah, I thought he just wanted to go with the girls, and I said, "This is crazy, you ain't going to do it." Well, he got on his bicycle and he took off up the road. And I called the preacher and I said, "Troy's on his way on that bicycle to go with them girls to the deaf school." And I said, "How about you going out there and stopping him?" And he said, "Well, I'm not going to do it." He said, "I can't stop him from going to them girls." Well, Troy parked his bicycle behind the church and he got in with them and went.
I think the sign language had a really big part in his life.
Yeah, it did. They, you know, on days they'd be out of school, and he just went on like he's going to school, and I caught on to it. I knew. I said, "Well, what's we going for, you know?" And he was going out here and catching Amy Sides and going to the deaf school. He done it a long time before I knew he's going. He had the wool pulled over my eyes. Amy just laughed about it. She said they enjoyed him going. He helped with the activities their playtime and all, or whatever, I guess. And then he took up with one of the little girls up there. And he had a little savings account at the bank where Mother paid him a little bit to work for her along. And he drawed just about all that out and bought this girl up there a dozen red roses. Took to that little girl. Mama found that out, and I thought she was going to die. He spent all his money for roses for that little girl. Beat anything she ever seen in her life. And he was a mess. When he took a notion to get a girlfriend, now you couldn't hold him back. He met that one at Caswell. I think that's where he met her. But anyway, this little girl at Caswell that lived, I believe it was Salisbury. Anyway, he said he's going to ride his bicycle down there to see her. He threatened for a long time. I said, you better not try to ride your bicycle to Salisbury.
Oh, boy.
But that girl, for some reason, her and her mama come to the Hickory Mall one time, and I took him down there to see her. When I seen her, I about fainted because she looked like she's about 10 years old. It's a little bitty thing. Well, she was older than she looked.
Oh.
But and he got acquainted with some little girl that lived over toward George Hildebrand. He rode his bicycle over there one time. I don't remember how he met up with her. But I think he rode over and she wasn't at home. He was a mess. Well, you know about when he met Jeannie, and Miles told him, said, we didn't send you over there. I think she's talking to Jeannie's daddy, Howard. She said, we didn't send him over to get no girlfriend. We sent him over to get an education. She thought Troy belonged to her anyway. Troy told her, said, ain't nobody gonna take Jeannie away from me.
Mama was.
He was a mess. Yeah, Mama always, she always was she was the boss of everybody, you know. And anyway, when Merle died, everybody told me, said, don't you let your mama tell you what to do now. She said, I know she's going to, and she did try to a lot. But,
Tried to take over.
But Papa was Mission Papa. He wasn't like that. Daddy was a good old fella. He was easygoing and hard working, easygoing. Everybody liked him. He was a good man.
What did you do as you watched Mama get older?
Well, she was always real healthy and spry. After Daddy died, she stayed by herself. So he died in 91. She stayed by herself till, see, what year did I go to stay with her? It was 2000, about 2001, I believe. And she was 94 years old when she got disabled to stay by herself. So up till that time, for about 10 years there, she stayed by herself. She mowed grass. She done everything. Mm-hmm. Then she had a slight heart attack or stroke one, and I had to quit work and go stay with her. And she was real sick most of that time, with first one thing and then another. She had already had the shingles, and they was horrible. And then when she fell and was in the hospital, I knew that she wasn't going to be able to stay by herself anymore. And whatever, they gave her something that she was allergic to that first day in the hospital, and she had stomach spasms. It was horrible. And she would just holler and go on, and I'd have to take her to the doctor. They give her a shot that would just about knock her out, and she'd just be plumb almost out of it for a couple of days, and then the stomach spasms would come back, and we'd go back to the doctor and get another shot. That went on for a couple of weeks. Well, I didn't know what was going to happen, but it finally settled down. She got over that, And then she had spells where she couldn't swallow right or something. Anyway, she said it felt like that she couldn't swallow. And we went through all that. And I tell you, I forgot a whole lot of it. But we was back and forth at the doctor for 3 years. And in the meantime, though, she was difficult to get along with. You couldn't do nothing right to please her. And she didn't want me to leave for a minute. If I'd go to the store, she'd say, "Now hurry back. If you meet up with anybody you know, don't stand and talk. You tell them you got to get back to me." So I felt like I was in jail for 3 years. She finally, though, that last time she went to the hospital, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to handle her because she lost control of all her bodily functions, and she wouldn't eat, and she couldn't get up out of the bed by herself. So I knew I couldn't handle it. But then she didn't live, Jean, about a month, I reckon, after she went to the rest home. She didn't live but about a month in the nursing home because she went for rehabilitation and she wasn't in no shape to be rehabilitated in no way, shape, or form. I think the doctor just let her go because we asked him to. We didn't know what else to do, really. But that was a bad time, and I had to stay away from home. She didn't want me to come back down here for nothing to even see if the house was still here. But I did once in a while. But anyway, that's a bad time when you lose both parents and you're going to lose the home place you lived in all your life, was raised there, and have to give it up. You know, it's not easy.
Now, what was it like watching all of your kids grow up and have a family?
Well, it's hard to see your kids leave home. Your mama can tell you that. When I especially remember when Linda left, because she had her friends come in and I buddied with them, you know. And when she left, they left me with 2 little ones. Ray had already got married, and so I sat and cried a lot because I didn't have nobody to talk to. But then, after we moved down here and Nancy and Troy and Max growed up, I was pretty put out when Nancy left because she married Jerry and he was an alcoholic, and I knew it wasn't going to work. And I told him it wouldn't, and it didn't. Like I said, she gave me more worries than any of them. It seemed like everything she done went wrong, and still is. But then Jeannie and Troy come, they got married and they stayed here just a little while, and when they left, I cried, and Troy said, "What you crying about, Mama?" And I said, "Because I know what you're facing out there in the world, and you don't have no idea."
I think you married a pretty good old lady.
Yeah, but that wasn't the problem. It was making a living and getting a place to live and all that. It's hard when you start off with the bare necessities and just have to go from there. And then Darren was on the way, and he lost his job, didn't have no insurance when he was born. How'd y'all get through that, Jeannie?
Just one day at a time.
And then there was Linda trying to, I don't remember where that come in at, but anyway, Linda got divorced with 2 kids, and that's really a worry. And I went to court with her, and it was all, and she lost because she didn't have the money to fight it. Anyway, that was a worry for a long time because Charles had the kids and she was going crazy over it, and finally they found out what was going on, and of course Carmen come back to her when she finally figured out what was going on. But
how did you and Papa start out? I remember you talking about sharing a house with someone before.
Oh, the first place we lived was a couple of rooms upstairs in this woman's house. And she was an older lady, her husband had died, and she had this big old house, and she rented the front part of it to another couple. Margaret and Edward Evans lived in there, and they had Richard, and he was a baby. And we lived upstairs, and there was 3 rooms up there, 3 small rooms. And we didn't stay there long, just over the summer, till my aunt and uncle was building a house. And they was living in a little house they rented, and they wanted to know if we wanted to rent that house when they moved out, so we rented it. Now that little house didn't have no bathroom. We had an outside toilet. We didn't have nothing in the house but cold water. We heated with a little oil circulator and cooked on a wood stove. Of course, a lot of people did back then. And that was pretty rough. We lived there till Linda was little. We had Ray and Linda there. And then we moved over. These houses was owned by another one of my uncles. And we moved over in a better house. It had 4 rooms and had a bathroom. We had a bathroom in it and hot water. So that was better.
Yeah, I would think so.
Oh, yeah. We still heated with a little oil circulator. And let's see. We had an electric stove there, I believe. Yeah, I think we cooked on electric stove there. Anyway, we lived there till the year that Ray started to school. And Merle had a friend that owned this house across there where that gas station is, across from Hardy's.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the house was at. A friend of his owned that house, and he was building him another house. And he wanted Merle to have a house. So he kept talking to him, but he finally talked him into going to the savings and loan and getting a loan on it, and they wouldn't loan the full amount, so he took a second mortgage on it. And when we got the loan paid down where we could pay him off, well, I guess we refinanced. I don't remember how we done it, but anyway, we got him paid off first. And see, I think we finished paying for that house when Interstate 40 come through, and people kept coming trying to buy our place, because it was there. It was going to be right there on Interstate 40. And this man from Forest City finally talked Merle into selling it. And we give $6,100 for that house. And we sold it for $30,000. At that time, that was enough to build us a house. But Merle wanted that big old barn behind the house and stuff, so we got in debt a little bit there. We bought the land, 5 acres of land, and built the house. We could have done it all for $30,000. We wound up having to borrow, I think we borrowed $18,000. Our payments wasn't but $156 a month. Wasn't even all that much at that time. But I think what happened to Merle, he was already sick. We just didn't know it, and things just went from bad to worse. And he was on that junkyard over here, you know. But when the road come through, when Interstate finally come through there, it took the junkyard. So they give him a certain amount of money to move it. But he didn't move it. He just went out of business. Mm-hmm. He sold the scrap off of it and just quit. He went to work for this other fella who was building houses and selling house trailers and all kind of stuff like that. He's the one he was working for when he got sick. But I think he was already sick when he went out of business over there, because he just didn't act like he was interested in nothing. He'd work and then he'd sit around out there at the barn, and he fixed the barn to where he had him a room to party in, really. And
to bring his buddy overs and drink some beers.
Always
and
a
play some
crowd
cards.
out there every afternoon, and weekends there was always a crowd out there drinking and talking on the CB radio and having a ball. He was a big CB radio fellow.
I think Dad inherited that from him.
Yeah, he remembers all that.
So you didn't like him having that big old barn with all them horses, did you?
No, nobody else in the neighborhood didn't like it either because it created a pretty good smell. Well, it wasn't just the horses. He fixed one of them stables to put these wild pigs in.
I didn't know that.
He was always doing something. Somebody come, or he went hunting or something. Anyway, he come home one day with 2 wild pigs. And he raised them things out there, and we killed one of them, and you couldn't eat the meat. When you got it hot, it stunk so bad you couldn't stand it in the house.
Ugh.
After we'd spent all that time working that stuff up and everything, you couldn't eat it. Couldn't eat a bite of it. But, yeah, that barn created a pretty good smell.
Where were y'all living whenever you started having kids? Where were y'all living?
Oh, we lived in that first little house of my uncle's when Ray was born.
So, what is your biggest hope for, like, the world, for all of your grandkids and great-grandkids? What is your big, you want them to know, what you want to happen?
My biggest hope is that they'll all get along with each other and love each other and help each other out and have a good time, and that they will all come to know the Lord and be in heaven one of these days.
I think that's pretty good.
That's my biggest hope.
Well, thank you.
And I told Darren when I die, he's going to get up at my funeral and tell him what my hope is.
Okay. Thank you, Mama.
Is that all of it?
Unless you want to talk some more. Anything else you want to touch on?
That's about all I know to talk about.
Okay.